Hey, how you doing? Welcome to live stream number 148. My name is Lars Christensen, and today's topic is fix, adjust, and remove things on your model. I'm gonna try to combine some questions I've got from you guys into just one fun little file. It's Monday, man. It is April 23rd. 2018. It's good to be back. Hope you have a good week planned. So, before we get into today's model, let me just show you. Oh, I'm not on the screen. This is all my fancy software. Now I'm on the screen. Whew. New software, new equipment. I watched the video on alignment and lighting, and I think it's getting better. But enough about that. Let's get in and talk about Fusion 360. All right, so this is today's model here that we are gonna play around with, and we're gonna talk a little bit about a few different things and how you can model parts up, how you can adjust them, and different things. And like I said, I got a few questions from some people, but before I jump into that, this is important. Before I jump into that, there's just two things I gotta kind of correct from last week. I made a couple mistakes in the what's new. First of all, this, and I talked about this on Friday, but in case you skipped Cam Friday, this generative button here, and I'm gonna do more in depth on this later on, but this function, I thought that it was available to every Ultimate user out there. I was wrong. I'm sorry, I did not do my homework. This generative button, generative design, is only available to Ultimate users who are paying for the software. So the cool thing about Fusion is that anybody who has a startup or hobbyist or a student license have Ultimate, but you don't have this one unless you pay for it. You can go back and look on Thursday's live stream if you missed what this generative can do. The other thing I just quickly got to touch on was Friday's live stream on what's new, and that was in Cam. Went to Cam, and if you go in to create a tool library, you create a new tool. Doesn't really matter what you do here, but we're talking about in Lathe that there was a custom thing that was supposed to be here, a new thing that was added in here. I kind of had to abandon ship on that one. Well, this one is kind of funny. This I should have checked it out before I went live, but you know, who has the time? It was never released out of beta in Cam. That was that just got missed in the whole making everything live. That specific function did not get released out of beta. But that's not a problem, because you, if you are using Cam, you can absolutely turn beta on. So let's do that. So inside of Fusion, now follow me along here, because there's gonna be a couple of clicks and you just gotta kind of like get this right, but you can always rewind the video, of course. Go to the file drop down, go to view, show text commands, then you get this one little thing here. Make sure that this one is down in the lower right, is set to text. Text, okay? Then you type in here, cam, C-A-M, dot beta mode, space, / on. Okay, hit enter. Now if we go back into creating a tool library, now you will see that this custom function is in here, where you now can create your own custom inserts. Same thing with the holders, custom. So that's how you turn it on or off. Now if you want to turn it off, you just go back in here, and you probably already figured it out. Cam.beta mode space / off, and is now off. And then you can go back up here to the file drop down and go to view and say hi text command, and you're back to where I was at. So just 5 minutes here, just had to correct a couple of things. But yeah, the thing inside of beta mode, you can turn that on. You have access to all the beta things that the CAM team is developing on, which is absolutely awesome. And that thing with the custom inserts and custom holders in the lathe, that's where you now can find them until they get released. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about adjusting, working with models. So what I'm going to do, I got a couple of questions from a couple of people in regards to, one was in regards to 3D printing. The question specifically was, what do I do if I have made a part and I realize that the holes, so I have 2 holes in this part up here, what do I do if they are not the right size? How do I the easiest way to edit them? So I'm going to talk about that. So I adjust those. And then I got the same question a while back from somebody working in with a metal part. Same thing, wanted to be, oh, get out of the cam mode here. Wanted to be able to adjust, you know, a dovetail style like this here. So we're gonna talk about that. And then I just also wanted to add, this goes back to the whole tolerancing thing that I talked a while back on the live streams about. This part here is like a gauge part, and I used to do this a lot when we were testing machines like YADMs and things like that. But this is also packable for 3D printing, where you make these gauges, and then you can see here there's some numbers on them, and you can kind of check clearances and figure out what kind of clearances should you have. Now, if you go down the description area of this video, you will find this file. So you can have that file, you can modify it and do whatever you want with that file. And then if we have the time, I sometimes get long-winded, I also wanted to show you how I modeled this whole part up here, because I think some people will get a kick out of that, talking about not always following best practices or different routes to get things done. At least share the way I got to this result here. So let me just hide this component first, and let's talk about holes. If you 3D print a part and you find out that your holes are too small, and this, you know, if we go in here right now and we click on the edge, did you know that you can actually see the radius down in the lower corner? Maybe didn't know that. If you click on an edge, this shows the length here. You don't have to measure things. So this one here is a 5mm diameter radius, or 10mm radius. You print it out and you suddenly realize that the hole is a little undersized. You know, that's the kind of like the tolerances with 3D printers, and especially with 3D printers. And that's why I recommend you do something like this, where you can test it out on your own and find out how it fits for your 3D printer, right? Now, one way, of course, to change a hole size is to find it in the sketch. So if I go in here and edit the sketch, you will see that we have this dimension in here, and I have these 2 holes linked together. So if I decided that I had to add, you know, a little bit of clearances, 0.1 or something like that, of course, this would be the easiest way to go ahead, change the sketch, go out again, and now the hole is actually that little bit bigger. But the other thing you can do, and this is nice, especially with imported parts, and that is that you can also select the inside of the hole, and if you hit the press pull, that's the Q button, all this up here, but I prefer Q on my keyboard. Then you actually get the offset face operation here, and that's another way to change the size of a hole. You see, you can type right in here. Now this is offsetting it by a certain amount. So you know, if I type in 0.1 again, I probably have to go minus 0.1 in this case. You can actually see that shows up down there, that now we've added that to the diameter. You could also select it both, so hold down Control and now it's gonna work on both holes if we added something. This is probably, you know, in my opinion, the quickest way to add a little bit of tolerance to the hole. Now that would become a feature down in the feature tree in here, where you can kind of adjust that kind of stuff. Now, also another thing that maybe also could be kind of handy to know is that if we right click and we select move copy and we change the drop down to faces and we select this inside face, we can actually also adjust the XY of that hole. So that's a nice little, I mean, that could be nice too, depending on your printer, right? Accuracy and things like that. Now the last thing that I find really cool is that you can also remove features in here quickly. Now you can just click the inside face, and if I hit delete on my keyboard, that hole goes away. If you didn't know that, if you fairly new to Fusion, select an inside hole and hit delete, and it will go away. And that is also recorded in the timeline. So if I roll back here, our holes are back, right? So it's history based. And the neat thing about this, and you can just, if you want to get rid of them, just highlight them down here and hit delete on your keyboard, and they're back again. The neat thing about this delete feature is it really doesn't come down to how complex this shape is in here. It's more about what's around it. So if I go in here, hold down Control and select all these faces here, like that, right? So now I got that whole dovetail style selected there, and hit delete. It's like it never happened. So that is a great way to clean up or remove things or work with things, whatever you kind of like are in. Now the last thing I just quickly want to talk about when it comes to making adjustments like this here. Let me just get rid of the offset face, and let me actually get back into the sketch down here. Right click and let's hit edit sketch and change this back to 10. Another thing that can be kind of handy, and this is really I think my favorite things about this is if you know, and many times when you're modeling things up, you know that there could be an issue with something like this. You could go ahead and make it a little bit easier for yourself with the use of parameters. So if I model this thing up here, and I know that, you know, these holes, I'm probably gonna have to come back and adjust these. And by the way, if you are printing something like this, you know, don't let it print the whole thing before you check the holes, right? If you just let it print, you know, the first, I don't know, 5 millimeters of thickness, you can check the hole already there, right? Before you go all the way through. But one of the things you could do was you could go up to the modify, and this would be a great time to maybe use parameters. So we could go in here and add a user parameter, and you give it a name. So I'm going to call it holes. And you got to put some kind of a value in here, and I would probably just do the 10, right? Because that's what I know that my nominal value is. Now, right now, it doesn't do anything. But if I go down and I find that sketch, what is down here? This is the sketch down here, sketch number 2. And I type, there's the 10 millimeters. If I type in hole, you will actually see the whole parameter show up here. Now again, nothing is happening right now, but if I go back up to the 10 here and I change it, for example, to 15, you will see the holes just got bigger. Let me change it back to 10. You see that? So what this lets you do is, with a parameter like this, can just be a little bit easier, especially if you are working if you're working with a bigger, have a long history down here, I'm not quite sure what you're going to go in, you print the first 5 millimeters, it really is all like going in and say change parameter, go in here and add, you know, that 0.1 if that's what you think should be in this. That can just be a little bit easier way to kind of work with that. And that brings up the dovetail, because the dovetail might seem a little bit more complex and how you want to attack that. One way could be to kind of follow the same. So let me turn the main the little sliding component on here. You could follow kind of like the same way of this. So if I go back into the original sketch, edit the sketch here, you will see that the height and the width are kind of driven by these 20 and 20. So here's another way you could use the parameters. Let me just go and look in the Hormel 2 here. If we go back into parameters, we could also, instead of making the full, we could also add one that we, for example, call clearances, I think. And let me just add that smaller value in there. Let's make this 0.2, just so maybe it's a little bit more visible. And if we go in and we find that sketch, so that's the 20 here and the 20 here, you could actually also write in here, just type in plus clearances. So now when I hit enter, you would actually see that this value gets changed by 2. So that's another way that you can use. So I just hit plus clearances. So you can actually do kind of like, you know, that might be a little bit easier for you maybe. Now you just kind of like, and again, I'm just gonna, when we do it like this, you can add that in there and hit OK. Now what you will see, let me just make it a little bit more extreme. Let's make it 0.5 maybe. What you will see is that this might actually be all right if you just had to, like, if it was just a matter of opening it up a little bit. But because this is not 45 degrees, this is 60 degrees, you will actually see that this clearance here is actually not the same. And so you know, this might not be the absolutely best way to do that. So what we could do was, let's go back and change parameters, and let's just abandon this by making it 0 for a second. The way that I would probably do this would be, let me go in and hide the component here. Let me open up a sketch, create a sketch here. And if I then hit O for offset, now you will notice that if I select an edge, see how it selects the whole outside of it here? Be aware of that in the offset you have an unchecked box over here. And now you can just select only the lines that you want. Okay? Now of course this is going the wrong way, because that's how it always is in my life. So I'll probably make this a little bit bigger. Now let's just add a value in here of minus I'm just going to make it 2.5 just to make it a little bit bigger, so it's a little bit easier to see. Let's hit OK to that, and then I would actually go up and create a line, and I'm going to show you both ways. If I snap into this endpoint here, so now I have a line there, you can it will actually snap in here and give you kind of like the parallel in here. So that's one way that you could kind of like sketch a line down here. But you could also just go out here. Let's go over to here and make sure we snap into that endpoint of the offset line. And then we could use the collinear relationship and say, I want this one and this one. Oh, I did get a relationship. See how I got a relationship right there? I got that. When I drew that line, it became perpendicular. It added a relationship to that. That was my fault. You can just select it. If this happens to you, and this happens, just select the relationship, click on it, and hit delete, and it goes away. All right, collinear. Somebody will correct me in the comments. Make all these and this one. Right now, it's all fully defined, and then you could just do a Q for the standard press pull. Make sure you select everything. And then I could just cut that clearance in there. Say to Object, select the back side here, change it to the extend faces, and hit OK. So now if we turn the component on and we look at it here, now we have a unified clearance. And of course this one we could also create into parameters. Change parameters, we can create another one in here. Let's call this one offset, because that was what we did. And let's just make it 0.1. That is probably, is that a norm? That's normal clearance. At least if it was like steel or something like that, be a good, somewhat slip fit clearance, depending on how big the part is. I think this one is 50 millimeters, whatever. Hit OK to that, and that is called offset. So let's find that, and that's the last sketch now. I know that in this one here. Change that to offset. Just hit O, and it will show up. And now we've essentially done the same thing, that we added that offset in here. So now that is controllable on the parameter. So now we have 3 different ways to do this. This is probably how I would, if I know that this is something that I gotta mess around with on a somewhat regular basis, I think parameters is a great way to kind of work with that. If you don't want parameters to be hunting down here, just click on that little add to toolbar, and is now part of your toolbar, right? Next, that arrow next to it, and now it's part of that, and it can show up here. So I hope that this kind of like answered a few questions in regard to how you can work with that. If you don't want it in there anymore, you can just drag it right off, and then it's back in here again. So this was kind of like what I planned on showing. I don't know, maybe this went a little fast, but you can always go back and you know, and kind of like rewatch this, you know, rewind it, rewatch it, and don't forget that, you know, these clearances. I did a couple of live streams on my on clearances in here, and kind of like my stand on it. There's no rules, but including in that one, I had that gauge part that I kind of like a model up as a way to check your tolerances, and you will find the link for that file down in the description area. Okay, so I hope this was good. Let me just run through how I model up this part, because that's one of the things that people, so there's some things going on. There was a movement and some different things, and I know that, like I said before, I learned a lot by seeing other people model up. I think that's actually where I learned the most. And the way, you know, people are always looking for the right way to model up, and you've heard me argue before, I don't think there is any right way. But the way I did this one, and the easiest way to kind of like just find it out, of course, is just to roll back. So this one started out with a 2D sketch where I kind of like modeled up this part here. And the way I did that, let me start a new sketch, was I started out with a center rectangle, so S key, and my center rectangle right there. And I made this one 50 by 100. Now when it came to draw up the dovetail, what I actually did was I drew a line from the midpoint here up to the origin, and then I drew kind of like out my dovetail out like this, and down like this. And I knew that, because it seemed like it was a nice kind of like way to draw it up and visualize it, I added a fillet. So adding a fillet in here, and I made it 3 millimeters, and then I hit D for dimension, and I added 20 millimeters here. And then to do the width here, if you don't know, you can, with the dimension tool active, right click, you can select pick a tangent of an arc, so it doesn't pick the center, tangent of an arc. Now I get the tangent of that outside of that fillet instead of the center point. And then I actually just mirrored it over. So in the sketch, I used the mirror because I knew that, and I mirrored over that line, the first line I drew, because I knew that if I started out by drawing this whole thing up, relationships and dimensions can quickly become a little bit more confusing. So I prefer kind of like to use the mirror command for something like that, what we call symmetrical kind of modeling. And then I went in, hit Q, press pull. If you don't see the view rotate, it's probably because you are not on perspective with auto faces. That will I don't know if it's going to do it now. Q, it's not going to do it now. That will normally rotate it. I made it 50 millimeters long like this. I placed the two holes on top, so that was the next here. Oh, I added a couple of fillets to it there on the inside and on the outside here. Then I drew the two holes. Nothing too crazy here, I think. Start a new sketch on the top face here. I always start out C for circle. I always just draw two circles, just like that. And then I normally, all right, they got to be the same size. So then I would make them equal. And then I can hit D for dimension, and I can place a dimension on here. Now I have one dimension controlling both holes. This just makes it easier by using that equal command there. Then I hit alpha line, and I drew a line from the origin here up till this point. So I could use the symmetry constraint. What is center point line. And what the symmetry does is that now the two holes will always kind of like follow one another. So now I could hit D for dimension and place a dimension between the center here. Make that 50 and a dimension down to here, make it 25, and they were now fully defined. Hit Q, press pull, and drag the arrow down and do through all, okay? Now I did this, and then I realized that I wanted, I wanted this part here, and I wanted this part here, the green part, as a reference. Not really, it wasn't really meant to do anything other than just to kind of like show, this was my main part, but I wanted a reference part, and I wanted to be able to show it slide. Makes life a little easier. Now, if you got to do any kind of slide, you need to use some kind of an assemble or a build as joint in here. Now, many of you guys who have been around for a while will be like, oops, so you didn't do rule number one, what was to create a component, new component first. But I actually, and this is where we can start talking about best practices, where I'm more about getting to the end result than following. I don't need to follow the world's best path. I really didn't care about this being a component, so I could use the joint, but I needed the other one of them to be a component. So I just created a new component, right click up here, new component, okay? That I needed to create a sketch for. So I create a sketch on this face, and I drew a 2-point rectangle, and I snapped it into this corner of our first body and drew it a little bit too big. So then I can use the collinear from here to here and give it a dimension, and I gave it 50, just like I did before. Now, to get this dovetail in here, I actually, the first way around, I actually hit P for project, and just projected those edges from our original body. And I'm assuming that there's some people sitting right now and say, yeah, that's absolutely the easiest way to do this, because if I go ahead and hit Q now, and I hit, to create this new body here, like that, then I kind of got what I I saw it after with a dovetail. My only problem was then I could not have showed you the clearance that I put in there, because if I had put in because the green one is following the orange one, it never showed anything, and you wouldn't actually get any clearance. What wouldn't have mattered if you were just going ahead to 3D print this thing. You could have done all the things, but I wanted to be able to show the gap here. So I actually kind of like had to backtrack just to show you that I also do that. So let's go back into the sketch here. And it's going to highlight these, hit delete, right? And then I actually drew it up the exact same way as you saw I did before. So I just drew a line up to about here. Doesn't really matter how long that line was. And then I drew this out like this and did a fillet, made that one 3. I then put a D for dimension from here to here, made that 20, right click and then select tangent from here to here, made that 20, and then the angle here was 60. And then I did the mirror over the line, select the 3 entities. Oh, it looks like I'm missing something. Okay, I'm not quite sure. Did this here. Somebody right now is yelling at me what I'm doing wrong, but that's okay. So I did this, and did I make the other one another angle or something like that? Alright, I'm not gonna worry about it. Stop sketch. Now you'll see there's a hole now. That's because I deleted one feature. I gotta reselect this in here. I'm not sure why there's a gap. I'm not gonna troubleshoot that. Yes, I am. What did I do with the first one? Didn't I give the first one a dimension? So I did. I didn't give it an. Oh, I didn't give it an angle. So what did this line snap into? Okay. Oh, because it became tangent, probably. Right? Is that it? I gave it a tangency. Let's go into this one. Edit the sketch. Delete. No, it should still be tangent. Somebody in the comments yelling at me right now. Alright. So, if I didn't make the first one 60, this is the first one I just drew up. I was going to delete these two. Line. I don't know what I snapped into. When I did this. Something like that. Can I still make that tangent? Okay, and let's mirror that across. Yeah, that should still be okay. Stop. Okay, let's just hide that component there because it didn't get into that. Good. See, when you change this, okay, so I don't know what I did with the first one. So I did this here. Now, this is a component, what means that this can now move around, right? Just Control Z to undo. So what I did here was I went in and I used a as-built joint, because I can do an as-built joint between this body and this here. Now it defaults to rigid. I'm going to select to slide, and then I'm going to select what it's going to slide through. It doesn't really matter, like that there, and then you have the sliding thing through right there. So that was how I modeled this part up. I had a couple of fillets to it, but I just wanted to kind of like point out kind of like some interesting steps, I think, of getting to the end result. Oh, and then I added some colors here. Do you guys ever play around with the appearances? Right click, appearances. I was just kind of like playing around. Like if you're getting into like wood solids, painted, there's all different kinds of colors and different things. And you can always click, if you just see the little arrow, you click on that, and then you can download colors and put all different kinds of colors on. All right. Woo. I hope that this was useful. Went over a few minutes because I gotta troubleshoot my own mistakes. But people always appreciate that. That's it. Leave it here. If you like what you saw, do me a favor. Thumbs up. Absolutely appreciate that. And there's not going to be any live streams tomorrow and Wednesday. I'm going on a field trip. I am headed to Ontario, Canada. So that should be good. So we will meet again on Thursday, hopefully. I hope so. If you're watching the recordings, thank you so much. I really appreciate you do that. And of course, if you're inside the live stream, I really appreciate you taking the time to join here on a wonderful Monday. I'm going to end the broadcast here, friends. Thank you so much, and hope you have an awesome day. Thank you so much.